There is a moment, cold and silent, that arrives in the life of every person who has ever given too much of themselves away. It is not a moment of rage, though rage may have preceded it. It is not a moment of sorrow, though sorrow is its constant shadow. It is the moment of severance, a psychological snap, clean and absolute, like a surgeon's wire cutting through bone. It is the moment you understand, in the very core of your being, that you are no longer a participant in a game you are destined to lose. You become an observer, and in that observation lies a terrifying ultimate power. The world tells you that to control something, you must grasp it tighter. You must hold on. You must fight. You must plead. You must prove your worth. This is the great lie. The ancient truth, the one whispered in the corridors of power for centuries, is that real control does not begin with holding on. It begins with the silent, unshakable knowledge that you can let go. It begins when you can walk away and mean it. This is not a story about winning. This is a story about a man who had to lose everything he thought mattered to understand what true power actually was. His name was Leo, and his education began the day he was broken. Leo lived a life of careful construction. He was an architect, not just of buildings, but of his own existence. His world was one of measured proportions, of balanced loads, of elegant solutions to predictable problems. He had built a life with Elena, a woman whose love felt like the final, perfect cornerstone placed upon a decade of diligent work. Their apartment was a testament to this shared project. Minimalist furniture, art chosen for its harmony of color, a balcony overlooking the city that twinkled like a promise kept. He believed in the equation of effort and reward. Be good, work hard, be loyal, and the structure will hold. This was his religion. Elena was a curator, her life a gallery of beautiful impressions. She knew how to arrange moments, conversations, and emotions to create a desired effect. Leo mistook this artistry for depth. He saw her social grace as warmth, her calculated opinions as intelligence, her need for admiration as a charming vulnerability. He was the foundation, strong and silent. She was the facade, beautiful and seen. He thought they were a perfect symbiotic pair. He did not understand that in her world, foundations were meant to be built upon, and then forgotten, hidden beneath more glamorous finishes. His desire was simple, and therein lay his weakness. He desired stability. He desired the quiet pride of a life well built. He desired to be loved not with passion's fire, which he distrusted, but with the steady, reliable glow of a pilot light. He provided, he supported, he was the calm in every storm. He believed this made him indispensable. What he failed to comprehend was a fundamental law of human psychology: familiarity, without the counterweight of perceived laws, breeds contempt. To be always there, always reliable, always forgiving, is to become a piece of the furniture, appreciated only when noticed, and easily replaced when the style changes. Leo was about to learn that to be a rock is admirable, but to be only a rock is to become something people eventually stop seeing and feel entitled to stand upon. The first crack was not a quake, but a hairline fracture, almost invisible. It was a Thursday. Leo had secured a major contract for his firm, a project that would define his career. Elated, he bought a bottle of expensive champagne and arrived home early, the cold bottle sweating in his hand like a trophy. He found Elena not in the living room or kitchen, but standing on the balcony, her back to him, phone pressed to her ear. Her laughter was not the light, polite sound she used in public. It was a low, intimate ripple, a sound he realized with a jolt he had not heard directed at him in years. "I know, it's so boring," she was saying, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Just another one of his spreadsheets about our future. 5-year plans, investment portfolios. He thinks life is a problem to be solved." There was a pause as she listened, tracing a pattern on the glass balcony rail. "No, it's not like that with you," she said, her voice dropping further. "With you, it's real, it's alive. He doesn't possess that. That fire, he's just safe. The word safe was delivered not with affection, but with a devastating casual disdain. It was the diagnosis of his entire being. Safe, as in predictable, as in unexciting, as in a placeholder for something more thrilling. Leo stood frozen in the twilight of the hallway, the champagne growing warm in his grip. The sounds of the city, the distant sirens, the hum of traffic, seemed to fade into a high-pitched silence. He felt a cold nausea rise in his throat. This was not a scene of dramatic confrontation. There was no other man in his bed, no slammed door. This was far more insidious. It was the quiet, private assassination of his character, performed for an unseen audience. He was not being attacked. He was being summarized and dismissed. The betrayal was not in the fact that she was talking to someone else. That revelation would come later, with the force of a sledgehammer. The betrayal was in the tone, the effortless cruelty, the revelation that the life he had built was, to her, a boring narrative she tolerated while living a secret, more thrilling one on the side. He must have made a sound, the scuff of a shoe on hardwood, the rustle of his jacket. Elena turned. Her face, for a single unguarded moment, was a mask of sheer panic. Then, with a speed that was itself a confession, it smoothed into a practiced, warm smile. "Leo, you're home early." Her voice was now bright, empty. "I was just on the phone with Clara, venting about the museum board. You know how they are." She walked towards him, her eyes flicking to the bottle in his hand. "Champagne? What are we celebrating?" He looked at her. He looked at the woman he had loved, the partner he had trusted, and he saw a stranger. He saw a brilliant curator of a life that was, in its most essential truth, a forgery. The foundation of his world had not just cracked, it had vaporized. And in that moment, Leo did something that would set the course for everything that followed. He did not confront her. He did not scream. He did not accuse. He simply nodded, a slow, mechanical movement. "The Henderson Project," he said, his own voice sounding distant and foreign. "We got it." "Oh, Leo, that's wonderful!" she exclaimed, embracing him. Her body felt like a mannequin's. He allowed the embrace. He even smiled. He opened the champagne and they drank it. They made polite conversation. He was perfectly calm, perfectly agreeable. But inside, the architecture of his mind was being demolished. The old Leo, the one who believed in equations and fairness, was being systematically dismantled. A new one was being born in the silent, cold rubble of that moment. A Leo who had just learned his first real lesson in power. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who has nothing left to lose, because they have just seen the worthlessness of what they thought they had. The days that followed were a masterclass in emotional decay. Leo moved through his life like a ghost, haunting his own body. He went to work, attended meetings, smiled at colleagues. But his mind was a cold, analytical engine, processing data. He began to observe Elena not as a lover, but as a subject. A case study in duplicity. He noticed the subtle shifts in her behavior. The way she angled her phone away from him now. The new passwords on her devices. The faint, unfamiliar scent of a cigarillo that sometimes clung to her clothes. A scent she explained away as coming from a new artist she was representing. He saw the increased frequency of her late nights at the gallery and the weekend networking trips with Clara. He said nothing. He became a silent archivist of his own betrayal. His love for her did not vanish in a fiery explosion. It underwent a slower, more sinister transformation. It curdled into a cold intellectual fascination. He was no longer hurt by her lies. He was studying their mechanics. How did she structure her deceptions? What tells did she have? The slight over-explanation, the unnecessary detail, the forced eye contact. He catalogued it all. He was dissecting the anatomy of a lie, and in doing so, he was dissecting the woman he had loved. The emotional connection was being surgically replaced by a clinical detachment. This was the beginning of the spiral. The first law of his new reality was taking shape. To become detached is to become powerful. Emotion is a liability. Observation is a weapon. He stopped initiating physical contact. He stopped asking about her day. He stopped sharing the small, vulnerable details of his own life. He became a fortress, its gates closed, its walls high. At first, Elena seemed relieved. She interpreted his withdrawal as preoccupation with the new project. It gave her more freedom, more space for her other life. She mistook his silence for ignorance, his stillness for weakness. But then, a subtle shift occurred. The balance of power, so long tilted in her favor, began to imperceptibly recalibrate. Her confident, careless demeanor started to show tiny fractures. She would come home and find him reading a book, calm and utterly self-contained. He was not waiting for her. He was not anxious. He was simply existing, independent of her presence. She would try to provoke a reaction, testing the waters with a story about a handsome client or a flirtatious comment from a donor. Leo would just nod, a faint, unreadable smile on his lips, and say something utterly neutral like, "That must have been interesting for you." His indifference was a void, and nature, especially human nature, abhors a vacuum. Her certainty began to erode. The control she had wielded so effortlessly, the control that comes from being the more emotionally invested party, was slipping away. She started to seek validation from him. She would cook his favorite meal, wear the dress he liked, try to engage him in conversations about their future. "Don't you think we should start looking for a house? A real home?" she asked one evening, her voice laced with a new, tentative hope. Leo looked up from his book. His gaze was calm, empty. "Why?" he asked. The question was not hostile. It was genuinely curious. It was the question of a scientist examining a peculiar specimen. "Why?" she echoed, thrown. Because that's what people do. They build a life together, do they?" he said, and returned to his book. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. He had not rejected the idea. He had simply questioned its very premise, and in doing so, he had questioned the entire foundation of their relationship. He was no longer playing the game of happy couple. He was observing the rules of the game itself and finding them arbitrary. This was the second law he internalized. The person who needs the least in the relationship controls the relationship. He was systematically dismantling his need for her. He was building a life, an identity, entirely separate from her. He started going to the gym not for vanity, but for the discipline of it. The pain of lifting weights was a clean, honest pain, a welcome contrast to the sickly, complicated pain of betrayal. He reconnected with old friends, not to complain, but to simply exist in a world where he was not defined by her. He took on more complex, solitary projects at work. He was becoming whole again, but it was a new kind of wholeness. A wholeness that had no space for her at its center. He began to see the world through a new, darker lens. He saw the same dynamics playing out everywhere. In his firm, the junior partners who were desperate for the senior partner's approval were the ones who were given the most work and the least reward. The ones who maintained an air of quiet competence, who had lucrative job offers from competing firms in their back pocket, were the ones who commanded respect and autonomy. In social circles, the people who tried too hard to be liked were often taken for granted. The ones who were somewhat elusive, who didn't always return calls immediately, were the ones others pursued. He was learning the third and most devastating law. Power is not taken. It is surrendered by those who care too much. By needing Elena's love, her validation, her presence, he had given all his power to her. Now, by systematically eradicating that need, he was taking it back. He was not trying to control her. He was making himself uncontrollable. His power was no longer dependent on her actions. It was becoming intrinsic. The spiral was complete. The man who believed in fairness was gone. In his place was a strategist, cold, clear-eyed, and terrifyingly patient. He was no longer reacting. He was waiting, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the moment he chose to walk away would be the moment he finally, truly controlled everything. The climax did not arrive with thunder and lightning. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in the bland packaging of a corporate email. It was an offer. A rival firm in another city, a bigger, more prestigious firm, had heard about his work on the Henderson project. They were offering him a position, partner, a significant equity stake, a chance to build his own team, his own legacy, free from the politics of his current role. The salary was a number that made his current one look like an allowance. The city was 1,000 miles away. He read the email sitting at his desk. The city sprawled beneath him. He felt no excitement, no thrill, only a profound, resonant click, as if a final, crucial piece of a complex mechanism had slid into place. This was not an opportunity. It was an exit. It was the physical manifestation of the psychological journey he had been on for months. It was his option to walk away, made tangible. He printed the offer letter. He folded it and put it in his jacket pocket. It felt like carrying a loaded weapon. He went home that evening as usual. Elena was there, which was becoming less usual. She had been making more of an effort lately. The apartment was clean. There was music playing. She had made dinner. "How was your day?" she asked, her tone carefully light. "Informative," he said, hanging up his jacket. The folded paper in the pocket felt like it was radiating a cold energy. They ate. The conversation was stilted, a series of polite volleys. He could feel her watching him, trying to read him. The void of his indifference was now a tangible force in the room, and it was making her desperate. Finally, she put down her fork. "Leo, we need to talk." He looked at her, saying nothing. His silence was an invitation for her to continue, and a weapon. This can't go on," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You're so distant. You're like a ghost. I feel like I'm living with a stranger. If you're angry with me about something, just say it. If you don't love me anymore, just tell me." This was her play. To force a confrontation. To drag the hidden conflict into the open, where she could use her skills, tears, apologies, promises, manipulations, to regain the upper hand. She wanted a fight because a fight was a form of engagement. It was a connection. Even negative attention was better than the void of his indifference. Leo took a slow sip of water. He placed the glass down with a quiet, precise click. "I know about him," he said. His voice was flat, calm. There was no accusation in it. It was a simple statement of fact, like noting that it was raining outside. Elena's face went pale. All the carefully prepared speeches, the possible scenarios she had rehearsed in her head, evaporated. She had expected denial, anger, tears. She had not expected this. This absolute, chilling calm. "No." "No what?" she stammered, a last pathetic attempt. "I know about the phone calls," he continued, his tone still conversational. "The one where you called me safe and boring. I know about the late nights that weren't at the gallery. I know about the weekends with Clara. I know about the artist, Marco, the one who smokes cigarillos." He listed the facts one by one, like items on a grocery list. There was no emotion, just data. Her composure shattered. The tears came, real this time, born of sheer animal panic. "Leo. Oh God, Leo. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. It was nothing. It meant nothing. I was confused. I was stupid." She reached for his hand across the table. He did not pull away, but he did not reciprocate. His hand lay there, limp and cold. Her touch felt like a contamination. "Please," she sobbed. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy. I'll end it. I'll never see him again. I love you, Leo. It's you I love. He was just a distraction." He watched her cry. He observed the heaving of her shoulders, the tracks of mascara on her cheeks, the raw, ugly need in her eyes, and he felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, no pain. It was as if he were watching a particularly sad scene in a film about someone else's life. The final tether had been cut. This was the moment of ultimate psychological transformation. The death of the last vestige of the old Leo. The man who felt was gone. The strategist remained. "I know you'll end it," he said, his voice still quiet. "Because it's over." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded offer letter. He smoothed it on the table between their half-eaten meals and pushed it towards her. She stared at it, her tears slowing, confusion replacing panic. She read it. He watched her eyes scan the lines, taking in the name of the prestigious firm, the city, the title, the salary figure. He saw the exact moment the full, horrifying truth dawned on her. This was not a man she had broken. This was a man who had rebuilt himself into something harder, stronger, and utterly beyond her reach. He had not been moping in silence. He had been planning his exit. He had not been weakened by her betrayal. He had been liberated by it. Her pleading stopped. The tears dried up. A new emotion dawned on her face, one he had never seen directed at him before. Pure, undiluted fear. The fear of loss. The fear of being the one left behind. The fear of realizing, too late, the value of what you had. You're leaving?" she whispered, her voice hollow. Leo finally stood up. He looked down at her, and for a fleeting second, he saw not the beautiful curator, but the scared, hollow woman she had always been. A woman who needed constant external validation to feel alive. He had been her foundation, and she had mistaken his stability for dullness. Now the foundation was walking away, and the entire structure of her reality was collapsing. "Yes," he said. It was the simplest, most powerful word he had ever spoken. He did not pack a bag. He did not slam the door. He simply walked to the apartment door, opened it, and stepped out into the hallway. He did not look back. He could feel her stunned, terrified gaze on his back, but he did not turn. The act of walking away was not a dramatic gesture. It was the final, logical conclusion of a process that had begun months ago in that silent hallway, listening to her on the phone. As the door clicked shut behind him, he felt a surge of something he had not felt in years. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't triumph. It was absolute, total freedom. The freedom of a man who had looked into the abyss of his own life, accepted its emptiness, and chosen to build a new one on his own terms. He had walked away, and in that single, decisive action, he had taken control of everything that mattered. Himself. The aftermath was not kind to Elena. The man she had, the artist Marco, was a creature of fleeting passion, incapable of providing the stability she had taken for granted. Their affair imploded within weeks, a firework of drama and recrimination. She was left alone in the beautiful, empty apartment, a curator of a museum dedicated to a life that was now a ruin. She tried to contact Leo, first with pleading emails, then with angry ones, then with desperate ones. He did not block her. He simply did not respond. His silence was a more profound punishment than any retaliation. He had rendered her irrelevant. She had become a part of his past, a lesson learned, a closed chapter. Her power over him had been entirely dependent on his emotional investment. Once that was withdrawn, she was left with nothing. She was a queen who had lost her kingdom, ruling over an empty throne room. Leo, meanwhile, moved to the new city. He accepted the partnership. He built a new life. It was not a life of frantic socializing or desperate attempts to fill a void. It was a life of chosen solitude, of deliberate action. He dated, but he was no longer desperate for a partner to complete him. He enjoyed company, but he was never afraid of being alone. His power in every interaction, professional and personal, came from this deep-seated autonomy. People were drawn to his calm, self-contained energy. They sensed that he was not needy, and that made him more desirable. They sensed that he could walk away at any moment, and that made them strive to be people he would want to stay for. He never became cruel or manipulative for sport. His power was not used to dominate others, but to ensure he was never dominated again. He was polite, generous, but there was always a clear, uncrossable line, a boundary of self that was non-negotiable. He had learned that the ultimate power is not control over others, but sovereignty over the self. Years later, he would sometimes think of that night on the balcony, of the sound of her laughter. He felt no bitterness. In a strange way, he felt a cold gratitude. Elena had been the anvil upon which his old, weak self had been shattered. She had, through her betrayal, given him the gift of a terrible and liberating truth. The truth that Machiavelli himself understood, though few ever grasp its full meaning. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But the most important fear to command is not the fear of others. It is the fear in others that you might leave. The fear that you have options. The fear that you do not need them. When you can instill that fear, not through threats, but through the quiet demonstration of your own independence, you hold the ultimate leverage. The final haunting reflection is this: we are all taught to hold on, to fight for what we want, to never give up. This is the mantra of the powerless. The powerful understand a different calculus. They know that the strength to hold on is common. The wisdom to let go is rare. The ability to walk away is not an admission of defeat. It is a declaration of independence. It is the final and only move that cannot be countered. Because when you can truly walk away, you are no longer a prisoner of the outcome. You are free. And in that freedom, you control not the other person, but the entire game itself. You control everything.